And the doctor walks in and he tells me, first of all, he puts his hands on his hips and he says, young lady, you're going to be dead within 20 years.
Hey, got something really cool I wanted to run by and let you know what's going on. So I'm starting a group that will start taking a deep dive into each one of these episodes. So we'll collectively come together and talk about the shows, talk about the guests. I'll be bringing back some of the guests to do some Q&A sessions and really take a further dive into their story, their journey, the episode, talk about, maybe some of the things you wish I would have asked on the episodes, do some Q&A sessions and the like. As a friend put it to me, it's really like a book club, but for the podcast. So a couple times a week, we'll go in, we'll break down the favorite shows of the week, and have cool discussions around everything that we've heard, we've learned, and want to know about their journey. Some of these guests will come in and they'll teach part of, what makes them awesome at what they do. And then, as always, I'll be providing regular value and content in this group. It's really cool because this only is going to cost $5 a month to join this group. And you'll be able to come in, interact with everybody else in there. So I'll put a link right in the show notes for this that you can jump in, come have a conversation with us, and we will really deep dive into each one of these episodes and help us all rise up together. Thanks for tuning in, guys. It's going to be a great show today. Having the show wasn't something I started out to do. But the day I found out somebody wanted to really sponsor the show was a really, really cool experience. So, guys, I want you to take some time to go check out Point Blank Safety Services and their new nonprofit, Blue Family Fund. These guys are doing some really, really cool things. And Stacy McGovern, who's the CEO over there, has been a dear friend, and she was a guest on the show. But these guys are literally taking, the off-duty officers and putting them out in security guard role. And here's what's cool about it is, as they're protecting our lives, they don't make a whole lot of money in that regard. No first responders are paid for the value they provide for our safety and our health and taking care of us. So these guys, Stacy and her team over at Point Blank Safety Services have really found a cool way to give back to these officers by helping them provide an additional income so they can continue to support and protect us. So do me a favor, guys. Seriously, go check out pointblanksafety.com and then go look at their nonprofit, which is Blue Family Fund. Now, this nonprofit was created because of the success of Point Blank Safety Services. They wanted to give back to the families of fallen officers and be able to give scholarships away to the families of current, police officers. So do me a favor. It would mean the world to me if you would go out and help support this show by supporting Point Blank Safety Services and their nonprofit Blue Family Fund. Just tell them Donnie has sent you. You heard it on Donnie Success Champions, and Stacy will take a tremendous and amazing care of you. Thanks, guys. All right, guys, I got to tell you, I'm really excited about this episode. So I'm bringing you Tracy Herbert, and we're going to talk about her journey when she was 17 years old, being diagnosed with diabetes and being told that she wasn't going to live, wasn't going to be able to have kids, wasn't going to be able to enjoy life because she had this life-ending disease. 41 years later, she is still going, rocking and rolling. They've made such advances in diabetes, and we're going to talk about her bike ride across America to finally end up on the Dr. Oz show. So great episode, guys. Inspiring as hell. I took a lot out of this one. Hope you enjoy this one as much as I did. All right, guys, going to be another fun episode. Through the power of networking, I've met Miss Tracy through a mutual friend, so I'm excited to really, really learn her story. So, Miss Tracy, welcome to the show, my dear. Please share your story with us.
Hey, it's great to be here this morning. 40 years ago, I was 17 years old, lying in a hospital bed, fighting for my life. And the doctor walks in and he tells me, first of all, he puts his hands on his hips and he says, young lady, you're going to be dead within 20 years. You're going to have horrible complications. You're going to go blind. You go on dialysis. You're going to have your legs amputated. You have juvenile diabetes. Never heard of diabetes in my life. Didn't know anybody with it. He went on to say, you're going to have to take shots several times a day for the rest of your life because there's not a cure. And you're never going to be able to have children. And he turned around and walked away. That was my introduction to juvenile diabetes, which is, I know, not the best bedside manner ever.
I think I met that doctor when I was in the Marine Corps. I'm just saying, because that's like really good bedside manner.
Not so much for somebody laying in ICU, and I knew I was close to death. I mean, I was really, really sick, and I had been sick for quite some time. And I kept calling the doctor's office, or my mother did, or father did, and they'd say, Tracy's getting worse and worse. I was an athlete in high school. I was always very active. By the time they finally figured out what was wrong with me in the hospital, my parents were having to literally get me out of bed in the morning. I was that sick. I had lost 35, 40 pounds, something like that. I'm almost 6 foot tall, and I was almost 100 pounds by the time they finally diagnosed me. So
I don't want to ask your age, but how long ago was this that it took them that long to diagnose diabetes? I mean, 'cause that's a regular thing now.
Right. Well, back then they thought, and this was 40 years ago.
Oh, right.
40. So if you could do math, I was 17. I think you probably know my age.
I'm a Marine, man. So math is going to be tough.
Thank you for your service, by the way.
My honor.
We're able to sit here and talk, and I really appreciate your service.
My honor. Thank you, dear.
But back then they thought it was only hereditary. And I had seen on a Phil Donahue show, which you're way too young to probably know who Phil Donahue is.
No, I know who Phil is. Old gray hair and everything.
He was talking about juvenile diabetes. And my best friend and I were watching it. And we're like, that's what you have. I was so excited. So again, I called my doctor's office. I was done with my mom calling. I said, I know what's wrong with me. And they're like, no, you can't because nobody in your family has diabetes. Well, I had all the classic symptoms. 2 weeks later, I was almost in a coma fighting for my life, and I had diabetes.
Oh, wow.
So I knew before my doctor and the medical staff at my doctor's office knew.
Well, that's crazy because one of my closest friends at the age of 22 got adult onset diabetes. Mm-hmm. And it went through the same. It took him a little while to diagnose, and he's my age, so he's he just turned 40. So we get them. Strangely enough, I helped him hire basically a little brother of mine. And that little brother at 22 got adult onset diabetes. But it was my buddy who diagnosed my little brother basically of this whole thing just because of things going through. I can't imagine 17 years old, doctor doing the drill instructor pose and standing in front of you and say, you're screwed.
Yep.
Hang it up.
Yep. And what was really strange, so once I got out of ICU, and it was a couple of days, I don't know, 2 or 3 days when my insulin started kicking in and they were able to get me out of ICU into another room, I had to start going to all these classes. Psychology, every class to make sure that you can handle a chronic disease because it's something that you don't get rid of. I mean, it's there for the rest of your life. You get it, and until you die, unless there's a cure, and I'm still believing in a cure, you'll be taking insulin several times a day. And so I started going to these classes, and there were 2 old guys in the class with adult onset diabetes. And they were probably in their 40s, which now I laugh and think, but I was.
They were old then, though.
They were really old. But that 17-year-old punk kid, I kept saying, this isn't going to happen to me. I am not going to die from this disease. I'm not going to have these complications. So in the middle of one of our class studies about learning about diabetes, one of the guys just started complaining. He said, I am so sick and tired about having to give up my eggs, my bacon, all the things now that we eat as diabetes, with people with diabetes. But anyway, and they kept saying, my life is over. My life is over. 2 guys in their 40s. And I threw everything up in the air. I was so mad. And I said, I would give my right arm to have your problem. You're worried about your grandson going to his birthday party and not being able to have any cake. I can't eat anything. And I'm never going to be able to have any grandchildren. I left. I just walked out. I thought, you know what? I can work on my own mindset. I don't need you all. Well, anyway, later that evening, one of the men came down and started talking to me before he left the hospital. These 2 men didn't even have to stay in the hospital. They were just learning how to live with diabetes, no medication, just what foods to eat. And he said, I learned so much from you today, and I had a mind shift change. And I thought, well, that's interesting. Anyway, he apologized. But what was so great about the conversation was I started coaching. And from that moment on, I've been coaching for 40 years, helping people learn to deal with diabetes before coaching was cool.
Yeah, that was way, back when you said you were a coach. You're like, okay, this is somebody who can't work for somebody,
right. Unemployable skills.
Right. Or, they don't work well with others. They don't play nice, all those type of things. That's funny. So at 17 years old.
17 years. So they're telling my parents, don't even waste the money to don't send her to college. There's no hope for her. And luckily my parents didn't believe that. I was very thankful that they didn't believe it. But I went back to high school this was in the middle of my senior year of high school, and I was kicked off a tennis team. Not because my skill had gotten worse. It's because back then they didn't have the American Disabilities Act. Right. You're sick. And I'm like, I'm not sick. I just have to take a couple shots a day. Anyway.
And I think even before insulin pumps were out, like both of my buddies now that have adult onset, both have devices that are permanently attached to them.
Correct. Yes.
So you literally had to manage by, back then, a finger prick.
We didn't even have those back then.
No, really?
We didn't even have home blood testing machines. That's how long ago it's been. Yeah, I know. It's crazy. All right, after that conversation, I got out of the hospital and I started trying to live like a teenager does, without eating the foods that typical teenagers eat. Because back then, I called it the starvation diet because really the only thing I could eat, unlimited amount of celery. That was it, celery.
Oh, shoot me now. I mean, I don't eat celery and I'm 41 years old. I'm just saying.
I'm like, but that's all I could eat. So one day I was getting ready to go to the first outing with all my friends, and we're going to a movie theater. And I'm running out the stairs. Bye, Mom. And she says, remember, you can't eat anything. And, of course, that was what happened with people with diabetes back then. You were on a very strict exchange program and what you could eat. My poor mother had to measure things out every day. And so I walked up. All my friends had ordered the Cokes, the candies, all that kind of stuff. And it was my turn. I said, could I have a cup? And she looked at me kind of like I was from outer space. And I said, well, could I get a cup so I can get a glass of water? Because back then we had drinking fountains.
Right.
And she said, no. I said, I'll be glad to pay for it. And she kept saying, no. And at that moment, I ran out of the parking lot screaming, crying, driving home. Why me? I mean, I was so distraught because everything was telling me the same thing. You can't. So I got to bed and I'm sobbing. My mom knew something was wrong when I walked in the house. I mean, you don't go to a movie. I was going to go see Animal House. Best movie ever. I did finally go back and watch it later. But I'm laying in bed and I said, Tracy, you have two choices. What are those choices? You can be better or you can be bitter. And just like that, I mean, instantly at 17, I said, I'm going to be better. And that's kind of what I've been practicing for years after years after years. And I'm getting ready to celebrate my 41st anniversary of my diagnosis.
Wow, that's
been
insane.
Crazy.
So I'm just thinking at 17 years old,
mm-hmm.
right? I'm a senior in high school,
mm-hmm.
Getting ready to enlist into the Marine Corps.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know which way was up. I only went to the Marine Corps because I didn't know what the hell else I was going to do with my life, right? So how in the heck did you find the gumption to say, I got this. I'm going to push forward. The world's not going to tell me no. I'm just going to go for it. I mean, where does that come from?
Well, obviously, for me, it had to come from deep down in my soul because, again, I was told I was going to die. I was told I was going to die with horrible complications, and I kept thinking, I'm not. Now, I think that's because I was a smart aleck 17-year-old kid. I mean, I'm just saying, because I was.
That's honest.
And I'm a hard-headed person still today. But I kept saying, I'm not. So I started researching while all my friends were doing their high school things. I was going into a medical school library at a local college in my area. And I was not really sneaking in. The librarian knew what I was doing. And I would spend hours and hours every day doing research on diabetes. And I've been doing it ever since. I mean, so it's just because I'm a very disciplined person. I didn't realize it until I became diagnosed with diabetes. But you can't not be diagnosed with diabetes and you have to be disciplined because it is so, as you know, with your friends, and your brother, you know how difficult it is. Well, you probably don't know, but it is very difficult.
Well, I do somewhat. My dad's got, type 2. Both of my buddies got adult onset type 1. I've got an aunt who had adult onset type 1, and she scares the hell out of me because she bottoms out tremendously. And it's really, really scary. She's hard to keep regulated. So diabetes has been a huge thing around my family. What's been interesting is watching one of my best friends and, my basically little brother do go through their journey with it because we've probably been out drinking too much together. And, I know we were in Orlando one time going to the Disney Resort and the one guy's pump broke. And so he was manually measuring his own amount of insulin because that's all he had. His wife's a nurse too, so that helped. But I just remember thinking we're walking through, Universal Studios and he's self-diagnosing insulin. So I've been really, really close to it, but I don't know how many people actually have. And it's come a tremendous long way along the ride. You started coaching at 17, right? Which is mind-boggling to me because I could barely tie my own shoes at 17. So has that been your lifelong career? Is coaching people through their diabetes journey? Or did you go a different route and then come back to it?
I did a different route. I've always coached. Back before HIPAA, the doctors would call me and say, please, or diabetes educators, please, would you start talking to this patient? They need some help on this and this and this, because I've done so well. Now, moving after my diagnosis, about 6 years later after my diagnosis, I finally got my home blood testing machine. That was incredible for me. It was the size of an old family Bible. It was huge. It was crazy. But it was such a blessing for me because I was like, I love it. I need this tool. But back then you were only allowed to test twice a day, which is crazy in itself. And then the oops happened. They always said you can't ever have children, but I got pregnant. My husband and I were like, this is not supposed to happen. So I called my doctor and we went in. They ended up putting me in the hospital for a week, and everybody kept saying, you cannot carry this baby to term. You cannot have this baby. And I'm like, I'm going to do it. And so anyway, he was born perfectly healthy. I'm perfectly healthy. 3.5 years later, I had my second child, who she's perfectly healthy. And so my doctor wrote a letter to the New England Journal of Medicine about my case after my youngest, who's now 32, was born because this doesn't happen with people, especially back then.
So now you're a miracle because you're now popping out babies and also a diabetic.
Yes. And after my doctor had kept saying, an endocrinologist is a doctor who helps people with diabetes.
Right.
My endocrinologist kept saying, you've got to write a book. You've got to write this book. So anyway, I finally started writing the book. And then when I spoke at Harvard a couple of years ago, and all the people kept asking me when I got off the stage is, how are you still alive and what are you doing? I'm like, excuse me, y'all are the, Harvard trained physicians. I'm nobody.
Right.
I don't believe that because I do believe I'm very powerful because I've learned so much over my years.
But when you're sitting across from doctors, I think it's total common sense type.
Yes. So that was incredible. And that's why my book became an international bestseller, is because they were buying a lot of my books to send to their patients and give to their patients because this is such a unique story. But every decade I do something epic to celebrate because, again, we have two choices. Now, I could sit back every year and say, oh, I've got diabetes. My life sucks. But I don't do that. I'm like, I'm better. Because of that, I've learned so much discipline. I've learned so many things, mind, mouth, and move. And we'll get into that in just a second. But every decade I do something. So the first year after my 20th anniversary of my diagnosis, I competed in the 100-mile Hotter Than Hell bicycle ride. I don't know if you've heard that.
Yeah, absolutely. Out of Texas. Yep.
Yes. Anyway, I competed in that, and I thought that was fun. And then for my 30th anniversary, I competed in a triathlon, even though I'm afraid of water. And so as my 40th approached, I kept thinking, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? So I rode my bicycle from San Francisco, Golden Gate Bridge, and I finished at New York City at the Brooklyn Bridge.
Oh, my goodness, girl. How many days?
For a total of 3,527 miles.
Oh, wow. How many days did that take to do that ride?
Well, it could have taken me, I could have done it probably in 6 weeks, but because I was writing another book, we shot a documentary, and I did a lot of speaking along the way and a lot of TV appearances. I did it in 93 days. Wow. But I had to wait for the last week because I finished up on the Dr. Oz show.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah. So I had to wait and kind of step back and spend a couple extra days in Newark waiting for the Dr. Oz show to finish up.
That's awesome. That's awesome. You know, I walked like a mile the other day and was like, okay, that's plenty. I can't imagine riding a bike across the U.S. That's so awesome. That's awesome. So I hear you talk about, you know, this is, you know, you've always kind of pushed forward and seen the brighter side of things. But I know with everything that as you're going along that there's a couple times you got punched in the face by life going, you know, why me? Why this? Talk about that a little bit. When you found yourself down in those dark spots and you're struggling with it emotionally, mentally, and the whole 9 yards, you know, walk us through that a little bit.
Well, the first time I was so down and distraught and probably depressed. Back then they didn't diagnose you with depression, but I think it was probably about a year after my diagnosis, and I got fired from my job because of my diabetes, because my blood sugar went low. This was before we had home blood testing machines. And anyway, it was nothing I could control, nothing I did. But that was a very difficult time for me because I kept saying, I can't do this because how am I going to earn a living? How am I going to be able to support myself? And then later on down the road, when, like I talked about a few minutes ago, my children, my youngest at this time was probably 7 or 8 years old. By this time, I'm taking 9 shots a day.
Oh, wow.
Not 2. I'm taking 9 shots a day. And my blood sugars are going up and then down, up and down. So sometimes I wouldn't even know my name. Other times my blood sugars would be so high. But I was driving my daughter, and my daughter was in the front seat of the car, and I nearly ran right into a telephone pole. Oh. If it hadn't been for her putting her hands on my leg to stop to hit the brakes, and then her grabbing the steering wheel, I wouldn't be here today. Probably she wouldn't either.
That's scary.
And that is scary. And so I went back to started researching, thinking, what is wrong with me? Because I'm doing 9 shots a day. I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do. But I started realizing what I'm doing to my body. I was eating the wrong kinds of foods. I was doing everything wrong. And I started realizing I need to eat to live, not live to eat. And my problem was I was following all the big organizations, everybody in the medical community saying, eat this for breakfast, eat this for breakfast, eat this for lunch. And I would spike way high, and then my blood sugars drop a couple hours later. And what I started doing was having salads and like leftover salmon and protein, crazy breakfast, but I would eat that every morning, and my blood sugars would stay level. And it's like, that's what I need to do. And so for my down times, which there are a lot of down times, you cannot have diabetes and not be down. Sometimes. And one of the complications now associated with diabetes is depression.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what's interesting is one of the buddies that, have the adult onset, Austin talks about this all the time, is his wife, I think, is the one that actually coined it. And I'm sure somebody else in the world, coined this phrase, but he's tired of calling it diabetes and he calls it livabetes. Mm-hmm. And he's always said somebody else, I'm sure, coined it, but it was that mental shift that it was livabetes and that they're going to fight through it no matter what because now they have their first child and, the second one's on the way, as they go through the journey. But flip it over to John, who's had it for a number of years, and he's kind of got this fun philosophy. He's like, I'm just going to take life as it comes. I know my wife and daughters and everything are going to outlive me. That's fine. That's part of the game. So I'm just going to go all in on life and just have a blast and just go for it. And nobody's going to tell me ever because, of this, I can't do anything. And he really, really lives that philosophy, and it's fun to watch. Is that how you've kind of lived your journey, your ride, the all in, let's bet on me and see what happens?
My mid-30s was a very difficult time for me. My blood sugars were all over the place, and then I started thinking, well, maybe my doctors were right. This is about the 20th anniversary, and they said you'd be dead within 20 years. I started believing it. But then I started doing crazy things, going for long hikes and doing the things that people said you shouldn't do when you have diabetes. But what really surprised me the most is my husband wanted to go whitewater rafting for his 60th birthday down the Grand Canyon, which is a 6-day tour, which we backpack. So we've gone to the bottom of the Grand Canyon, spend a few days, and then hike back out. We do crazy things like that. but I always have control of my insulin. I always make sure I have extra of all my supplies. But I was scared because when they started talking to me, the outfitter that we hired to take us down the Grand Canyon, they said, what do you do if something goes wrong with your insulin? And I said, I don't know. I said, I need insulin to live. But what they did, there was 6 boats because there was a whole group of us. And so they would say, we're getting to some rough rapids. Okay, where's all the insulin bottles? So they had all my insulin, all my pump supplies and continuous glucose monitor supplies. They had them all separated. So if I did flip over or one of the boats, I would.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But so like when we backpack, you're supposed to keep your weight, your backpack less than 30 pounds is what we try to do. But with me, I carry extras of everything. When we fly internationally, people say don't fly internationally because of your supplies. I just carry, like I'm carrying my kitchen sink with me. I carry everything with me because you have to, because without insulin, I die.
Yeah, what's funny about that is, everywhere mom goes, because of dad having, type 2, she's always got candy bars and, things in her purse, and somewhat, through high school and stuff, we always go, hey, mom, I know you got something in your purse. I'm hungry. That's our snack bag. She's like, this is for dad, if he bottoms out.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's funny.
And my kids knew the same. I always carry jelly beans with me, and I've always done that. So, because it's easy for me, I can just pop a couple of jelly beans if my blood sugar starts dropping. But my kids always knew that's kind of like mom's medicine, because I know I can't have that because you need that to live. But my kids went through a lot growing up. I mean, my son, which was hilarious, he was probably 8 or 9 years old. He would sell tickets to all the little neighborhood kids for like, I don't know, a nickel or something, to come watch me give myself a shot. I thought that was pretty entrepreneurial for him.
That is entrepreneurial as all get out. I love that.
I said you probably could have sold him for more money. But, we all have struggles in life, and being around positive people. I'm a very active person. Obviously, you can't ride your bicycle across the country and not be active. Right. But when things start bothering you, whatever you're going through, we all go through things. Mine's just a little different than maybe what you're going through. But what I do is I go out and I go for walks, or I go for a run, bike ride, play tennis, whatever I need, because that starts getting those endorphins back in, and you start feeling better.
Absolutely.
But what's so crazy, what people don't really understand is not even people with diabetes, but when you have that great pizza or Mexican food or whatever you have for lunch, every single person's blood sugar spikes, with or without diabetes, and then it crashes. So what I do, I don't eat that kind of stuff very often just because it does make me crash and I don't like the way I feel. I do it in the evening, so then I'm just lethargic on the couch if I don't have to work or something. But like
everybody else is.
Yeah.
Just doing a little bit more extreme.
But so you work around your schedules. That's why I tell people it's so simple. But you'll be surprised if you're down in the dumps what you can do to just change a couple of things in your life, just simple things, eating and exercise, and then have the right mindset. To me, it's the 3M formula: mind, mouth, and move. Those 3 things are what kept me alive for 41 years and 2 weeks.
That's so awesome. And you just gave me another one, because now I get something to celebrate, which means I could go tell my wife that jelly beans are medicine. So, and I'm completely addicted to jelly beans. Anybody listening, if you want to ever get me seeing anything, it's rum and jelly beans, and we're set. That's so awesome. That's so awesome. And I love this. So talk to me again about these 3 M's, because that was really, really cool. Say that again for me, and then tell me a little about it. Mind,
mouth, and move. Mind, you got to have the right mindset. Whatever you're going through, because we all of your listeners, we all go through the same thing, whatever it is. And you got to have the right mindset. I can do this. Whatever's going to happen to me, I can tackle it. And I don't wake up every morning saying this is going to be the best day ever. I try not to get my feet out of bed until I've at least said 3 positive things. If I think a negative thing like, oh, I wish the alarm hadn't gone off, then I have to lay in bed and give myself 3 things to say that's positive. So always have the right mindset. Mouth, like I said earlier, eat to live, don't live to eat. When I discovered that, it changed my life. I'm a big believer, and I do a lot of protein shakes now. We do that every morning for breakfast. We've kind of changed. We're not your typical American, the way my husband and I eat, because we both want to continue backpacking into our 80s and 90s. And so you have to take care of your joints. And that's why you don't want to eat a lot of the, high glycemic foods, which is all that is carbohydrates that spike your blood sugar.
Yeah. So
and then move.
No, go ahead. Go
and then move. Find things you enjoy, because I enjoyed riding my bicycle across the country. You probably wouldn't. But you find something you enjoy to do, dancing, tennis, golf, whatever it is, and go out and do it, because the more we move, the better off we're going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. So and that's beautiful, by the way. I'm going to borrow that. And I love the 3 positive things in the morning is, I have a very, very hard ritual, every morning, the things that I do to get my mind right and moving in the right direction because of experiences in life. Life likes to punch you in the face, and it's your ability to stay mentally strong through that fight to make sure you win and come out on the other side. When you travel, because when my wife and I travel, we travel on our stomachs. That's a joke we always tell everybody is we don't buy all the touristy crap. We go find the restaurants, right? I want to go find, the small mom and pop places that everybody goes to where the good food's at. With you guys being a hell of a lot healthier with your eating style than I am, how do you guys travel? Fixing to go to Ireland, and I guarantee I'm going to find myself in some Irish couple's, kitchen eating at their table because that's like the number one place that all the people know about. How do you handle it in those type of situations? How do you regulate?
Everything is in moderation. First of all, you have to moderate what you do. But what we do is I always carry healthy snacks everywhere I go. That's just what I always have nuts with me everywhere I go. Sometimes fresh vegetables if I'm local or if I'm in the United States. But when I travel internationally, the first thing I do when I get through security is I fill up my water bottle. I always carry water with me. And everything I do, I'm drinking water because, our bodies are 60% water and we need to rehydrate. And that's why so many times we make these mistakes eating. But then I go to restaurants, I go to people's houses, and I just ask them, what do you do? How do you make it? When I go to a restaurant, though, I specifically ask several things. Could you substitute whatever for olive oil? Could you substitute, I always put salad dressing on the side, always. And you probably won't be eating a lot of salad in Ireland. I don't know because I don't know about Ireland. And anyway, in Japan, I stay totally away from greens. I ate a lot of cooked vegetables, but never any salads. And then get gravy on the side if you're a gravy person. Stay away from condiments because we all, back 45 years ago, the first time I went to Europe, I spent a summer in Europe backpacking through there. We didn't have ketchup and stuff like we do now everywhere in Europe. I mean, because back then it was all, seclusive. But now we're like, it's all America everywhere we go. That's why the whole entire world is unhealthy because you can find McDonald's on every corner. Nothing against McDonald's because I did go to McDonald's when I was in Japan, just saying, because I had to have something. But the thing is, though, it's all figuring out what's good. But then also, if you're going to eat those good meals, the good meals that you really, the soul-filling meals that are heavy, do it in the evening before you go to sleep. But when you get off that airplane, drink water the entire trip. Even if you drink alcohol, don't drink alcohol on the plane, but get out in the sunshine as quickly as possible.
Now, hold on. I got to jump in there because that's a 9-hour flight from Canada to Ireland. I don't sleep on planes.
I don't either.
My plan is a couple of Captain Morgan's, very stout. I could try and take a nap because as soon as we land, I got a 2-hour drive to get to our bed and breakfast. So
okay, well, see, the problem with when you drink, and now Japan, I probably had a drink when we took off just because it's a 14-hour flight from where I live. But what I thought was, what you don't want to do is alcohol dehydrates you, and the problem is when you're up in the air. You can get sick more because of the filter system and everything. But what you want to do is drink a lot of water. So if you're going to have some fun drinks, have a couple of glasses or bottles of water in between.
Wait, can I order that at the bar? I'm just going to start walking around. I just need a fun drink.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I told them that all. When we were in Hawaii, I was at a mastermind event in Hawaii a couple of years ago, and everybody in my mastermind group was laughing at me because I'm like, what's a fun drink, but it can't be sweet because I don't do things. But anyway, so they're like, well, let's try this. But that's another thing. You'll find food in Ireland, just like you do all over the world, that's unique to Ireland. By all means, try it. See if you like it, but just do it in moderation and get out and walk. But get out in sunshine to avoid the jet lag because you're going to be kicked with a jet lag.
No, I know my buddy John, when he was down in Galveston or Corpus Christi in Texas, he got into a bad batch of shellfish. And found himself in the emergency room. I mean, he completely bottomed out because diabetics can't take all of the regular type of medicines that we can because of the sugar levels and everything else in them. He almost died from that whole episode. So, I mean, I guess tries to be mindful, and he stays away from shellfish from now because anybody, you have a bad experience with a food type, and you just walk away from that altogether. But Those type of things running through your head is, what's this? What did somebody, mistakenly put a pound of sugar in this meal before I? Do those type of things run through your head as you're traveling and everything else?
Oh, when you have diabetes, it's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Every single thing you do, and when you get away from your doctors and your pharmacies and everything, you really have a problem. Because if you do have a problem, like you're in Galveston, if I were in Galveston, I'd be like, what do? You have to go to the emergency room. Mm-hmm. But I'm very careful, and I usually don't try a whole lot of weird food. Now, I did eat raw horse in Japan. That's kind of the thing that my son was teaching English in Japan when we went over and visited him, and all of his buddies were trying to get me to try something. I said, I'll try it. So I ate raw horse, and I survived that. But I am pretty typical, more cautious when I eat, especially food that I know in that community or in that area is probably not the safest to eat for my stomach. But I always carry probiotics with me. I take probiotics religiously because that keeps me from getting sick. I never get sick, which is crazy because people with diabetes have an immune system that's not quite as strong as other people. Right. But over the years, I'm into supplements a little bit more than a lot of people. But I tell you, take a probiotic with you before you go. And if you have to, my son swears by it. He's traveled all over the world. He says take charcoal pills that they sell at the health food store. Now, don't go get like a charcoal brick and eat it.
Hey, I got a burn pit in the back of my farm.
No, don't do that. But they sell them at some health food stores, and if you let them know where you're going. And then if you do get sick, that absorbs the stuff. That's what they give people who like OD and things like that.
Right. So I'm curious, since you spent some time in Japan, did you get to try habu sake? Do you know?
Yes.
You did. So for our listeners, I have a lot of veterans that watch the show. Listen to the show. Habu sake is the habu snake is the most poisonous snake in Japan. Yeah. They actually freeze the snake in a striking position, put it in a bottle, and fill it full of this unique sake. Very gamey, very earthy flavor. My brother, who did 24 years in the Marine Corps, brought a bottle back from there when his last duty station was there in Iwakuni. And so every once in a while we'll get a wild hair to try this habu sake. So
that was not my brilliant moment of my life.
But it's an experience. You got to try it.
You have to do it when you're there. But
absolutely.
But traveling can always be difficult, but being prepared for everything. I mean, it could be going over to the grocery store down the street, and you get that hunger pain and you're driving by a convenience store and you've got to run in and get a bag of potato chips. No. Drink water, and then wait 15, 20 minutes, see if you're still hungry, and then maybe you get something. A lot of times when we feel hungry, we're dehydrated.
Absolutely. Well, for me, that my trick is I'm addicted to gum right now. That's my new thing. Instead of going to get the bag of chips or the candy bar, go get me a stick of gum. And, my wife laughs because in my truck I'll have like 6 different varieties of gum just so whatever I may be in flavor. But it does, crave some of those hunger thoughts and everything else as as we get older and our metabolism decides it doesn't want to keep up anymore. So you've got a lot of exciting things going on. You've been on the Dr. Oz show. You've got a new book out. Walk us through all that fun stuff.
My second book's not quite out yet. It will be out because I'm releasing it November the 1st because November is Diabetes Month. Okay. So I'm releasing it then, and I've got a media tour around the country again. But this book is about the ride. But it's not just about the ride like I pedaled, 114 miles today. It's about my experiences, the people I met along the way, about Killer Hill, for example. Let me give you a little snippet about Killer Hill so you can have the previews. I got lost. I'm directionally challenged, which is funny because who rides their bicycle across the country but me? And you're directionally challenged. But I got lost one day, so I stopped and I saw a man and I asked him. He said, "Oh yeah, you're fine. You go right, then you go left, you go right, and then you'll be to Killer Hill, and just past Killer Hill is Virginia City because that's where I was heading, Virginia City, Nevada." And I said, "Killer Hill?" And he said, "It's 3,800 feet elevation in less than 12 miles. And you look over the edge and it's a drop off. And then the cars are literally touching your arm when you're riding because it's the number one bicycle catastrophe area in Nevada. And I had to take that one. But that was so hard. But what was so interesting because I would get to a switchback and I think I'm finished. And then I'd be like, "Oh, nope, well, here we go. Keep going, keep going, keep going." But once I got to the top, and I have this picture as my backdrop, I love that picture because I accomplished something huge. And when we accomplish something big, we have to celebrate. But I overlooked, and I saw the Sierra Mountains, I saw the valley, and it was so pretty. But so those kind of experiences on my ride that I'm sharing with my people that are going to be purchasing this book, but also to provide hope. Because when we left, my husband, who also is self-employed, he drove an RV. And so we catch up about every 50 or 60 miles because, again, I have diabetes and I have to keep my insulin in regulated temperatures and all my insulin pump supplies, my continuous glucose monitor supplies. So we catch up about every 50 miles, 60 miles, and have lunch, get more water and things. But what was so interesting was I would be lonely. I mean, it was very lonely during the day because you're out there by yourself. I didn't listen to any music. I didn't listen to books on tape, which I usually do, because I wanted to do some self-reflection, but I also wanted to grow because, again, I don't want to be stagnant. I don't want anybody to be stagnant. And this grandmother rode that far, singing to cows, talking to cows, looking at, waving at people. People thought I was crazy, but it was just an amazing experience and those kind of things. Plus, I do a lot of thinking about when I was first diagnosed and what I've learned and things like that. But it's much more so than just a book. Like my first book was based on my life with diabetes and what I'm still alive and what I'm doing because that's saving people's lives. This one's about a grandmother who had an adventure riding across country and has lived with type 1 diabetes. Back then it was 40 years.
Wow, that's awesome. That's awesome. I love this whole when you got around the switchback, and here's why. When you're in the Marine Corps, you do these things called humps, and all the hump is a hike with an 80-pound pack on your back, and you go for miles. My longest one was a little over 50 miles, okay? When you're going up certain hills, when you're going up, you can see the crest of that particular hill, and you get there, and you're like, that's it. As soon as I get there, you're at the top. Well, and if you're in Camp Pendleton, California, there is no top. Every time you got to the crest of one, there's a whole nother one you got to climb. And that was a huge life lesson for myself as I was going through is you're never going to stop climbing. Yeah. Right? So you get to that hill, which is the milestones for me, and then climb to the next one, and then just keep climbing. And eventually you might get that downhill joyride. But what I tell everybody, it's the downhills are as tough as the uphills.
Donner Pass, if you know anything about California, which it sounds like you know a little bit about California, Donner Pass was one of the highest summits I hit, which I can't remember, the 7,500 something feet elevation. And the ride down, I thought I was going, it took 2 days to get up because it's that long of an incline. And then I'm riding down and I'm like holding on to my brakes, trying to shut it down. And I'm going 45 miles an hour and I'm not slowing down. That was even more scary. That was even harder than climbing up those hills.
Yeah, that's and 45 miles an hour is fast no matter what, but super fast on a bike. That's scary.
And a lightweight bike, because my bike was very lightweight because I wanted to keep it lightweight. I didn't carry many supplies or anything with me throughout my ride because that's why I kept everything in the RV. Right.
And I don't think people are better than Enner by any means, but girl, you're a hell of a lot better than I am because I would have looked at those hills and said, no way, not happening, Well,
you know why I didn't look at that hill? You know why? That's a very interesting point. I'm glad you brought that up. I received an email. We left Fort Worth saying if we can just encourage one person, this ride is worth it. And I received a message from a mom. I met so many amazing people this last summer. But this mom said, my 6-year-old daughter had given up hope on life. She's had diabetes for 2 years. And the days in and days out, we don't get a vacation from diabetes. And she said, if only I could find somebody. And this girl found me, or her mom found me, and they started watching my posts because I did Facebook Live posts. I did all sorts of things. And this mom took this little 6-year-old girl out, and they bought a United States map. They hung it in their living room. She printed out a picture of my head and a picture of a bike, and this little 6-year-old girl kept moving my face throughout the entire. I know. And I know. I don't share this very often because I cry every time I talk about it, but by the time this ride was over, this little girl had hope again. And that's what my whole entire mission in life is. Whatever we're struggling with, I talk to people on the side of the road who were homeless, and we spent time talking because we're all in this fight together, guys. We got to get together, and together we're stronger.
Absolutely. That's beautiful. What people don't understand is as they're going through their journey, I don't care where you're at. You have fans. You have people that are looking up to you that are cheering you on even when you don't know they're there. And I love that fact to always know that there's somebody sitting behind you going, you got this, right? You're going to make this. You're going to be all right. Keep pushing forward, even if you can't hear them. because you never know what your journey is going to do to inspire somebody else's story. So that's beautiful. That would tear me up every time if I were in your shoes. I get it. I mean, Marines don't cry. That's not a thing.
But, I met so many great kids, so many people. I met a lady, I'd like to tell this story too, because I met her on the day 3 or 4, and she was morbidly obese, without hope. She had no hope. And she says, I wish I could ride my bike across the city. And I said, well, actually, I'm riding across the country. We started talking. So I got off my bike and I started talking to her. And she said, I can't. I said, what can you do? I can't do anything. She was waiting. She couldn't even walk around the block to go home. She was waiting for somebody to pick her up. And I said, walk to the end of your driveway and then walk back up. And then tomorrow do it again and do it a couple more times. And then go next door and then go to the end of the street. But by the end of the ride, it was like day 90 of my ride, I got a message from her saying, I just signed up for my first 5K.
That's so awesome.
I know.
Cool.
I mean, we all have that in us. And it may not be a 5K for somebody. It may be, hey, just start believing in myself, because we all have to believe in ourselves. But having a good posse, I love the people that I'm very careful who I spend time with, because they can either drain you or they can help you, and they can boost you. And I don't like to be around people who drain me as much. I mean, we all have to be around those kind of people. But when I do, I try to spend more time with those other people. But I tell you one thing, it's in here for me sometimes. It's like, Tracy, you can't. And it's like, don't. So I have to say out loud, because when we speak positive words out loud, we realize we can do it. We believe it. And so throughout the ride, I'd say, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this.
That's so awesome. So awesome. And inspiring as well. I know you did these crazy things on your anniversaries. Mm-hmm. What went through your mind to say, I could ride across the entire U.S. on a bike? I mean, because my best ideas usually pop up at like 3 o'clock in the morning, right in the middle of sleep, and then you can't go back to bed, right? Uh-huh. Was that like an epiphany moment? Like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to ride across the U.S. I mean, was it that, or is it more of a planned out strategy? Well,
it was more of an epiphany moment. I really wanted to do the Appalachian Trail, which is a 6-month hike. That's what I really wanted to do, but I knew, what am I going to do with my insulin? I couldn't do it. And so one day I was walking and praying and meditating, and that's what I needed to do. I was overwhelmed with it. But what's funny, I've got the best husband. I mean, he's amazing. But it took me 2 weeks to have the courage to tell him what I was going to do. But I knew he was going to say, you're crazy. But you know what he said? I was telling him over breakfast one Saturday morning, and he's like, okay, we got this. Let's do it. But I didn't even plan this ride I didn't even think about it until mid-February. And we left Fort Worth, Texas, where I live. We left the end of May.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That's not a lot of planning time.
Not a lot of planning time. Nope. But no. When you have diabetes for now 41 or almost 41 years, you do something every day exercise-wise. Because people say, how far did you ride every day? How did you train for it? Well, I've been training for this for 41 years, because you have to do that when you have diabetes. Everybody should do it if you want to reduce your risk of cancer, heart attacks, Alzheimer's. I mean, it's all related. Eat healthy, exercise, have the right mindset. But it's just something that we did, and I just knew I couldn't fail, which is kind of weird for me, but I love it. And then we did a lot of GoPro, so we're doing a documentary as well, but it's not going to be released probably until next summer.
Okay. All right. Well, if I'd have known you were doing the GoPro thing when you were doing it, I'd have snuck on. I've got a goal of become an extra in a movie. So I'll, you ever do that again, let me know. I'm going to just be a random dude running by your bike so I can get a 2-second clip. And
there you go. There you go.
But Tracy, this is awesome and inspirational. I love hearing about your journey and everything you've gone through, and the trials you went through. I mean, from a 17-year-old kid that got completely punched in the face by life, horrible bedside manners, mm-hmm. from doctors, and really looking at life and saying, pardon this expression, but saying, hold my beer and watch this. I mean, as you continue to push forward and mm-hmm. conquer it all, just truly amazing. How do people find you? How do they reach out to you? How do they are looking for advice, inspiration, or they just want to see whatever the thing you're doing? How do they get in touch with you?
Well, my website's the easiest way to get a hold of me. It's tracyherbert.com. It's TracyHerbert.com. I do a weekly podcast, Your Diabetes Breakthrough, and it's not just about diabetes, but it's about healthy living. It's about goal setting. It's all about our bodies, because our bodies are critical to all work together. I also offer 31 Days to Optimal Health email series that you can just go on my website and do it. And they're fun. Sometimes there's always an inspirational quote. There's some good tips. There's something funny. It's just a wide variety of things. And then, of course, my first book, Diabetes Tragedy to Triumph. And then if you're really wanting to do something fun and crazy, we're going to be doing a cruise in February of 2019. And it's a week-long cruise in the Eastern Caribbean. And people are going to be able to, it's a 100% right now, money back deposit guaranteed if you sign up. And it's going to be a week of learning to live successfully with diabetes, the strategies, but it's going to be a big group of people that all have diabetes or don't want diabetes. And it's going to be a great event.
Oh, that's
It's all on my website, but there's so many things because my hope is to provide hope. Because without hope, we have nothing. And that's what my life is all about. And I can't say I learned that at 17 years old because I didn't. But after going through all the struggles I've gone through, but I've had so many successes. I don't let struggles beat me down. I do let it beat me for a few minutes maybe, but I say, I can do this. I've got it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, here's how I like to wrap up every episode. Mm-hmm. And I do stump some people on this, so get ready.
Okay.
If you were going to leave my audience, champions who listen to the show, and you were going to give them a motto, a phrase, a quote, a mantra, a saying, something they can carry with them on their journey, especially when they're stacked up against it and maybe they're hitting the dark times in their life or whatever else, what would be that motto, phrase, or quote you would say, pull this out, remember this?
You can do this, I guarantee it. Don't let stinking thinking cause you to have any trouble. If you have to write notes all over your computer, all over your mirrors, positive, inspirational quotes, Bible verses, whatever it is, find something positive and hold to that positive fact. And then eat to live, don't live to eat. Because what we put in our mouth messes up with our minds, our goals, getting up and doing things, being productive at the office. All those things are so important.
That's beautiful. Tracy, thank you so much for being on the show and sharing your journey with us. I've really enjoyed this. It's been a lot of fun having you here.
It's been great. Thanks.
You know what, guys? Really, thank you for listening to this episode. I really appreciate it. It's a lot of fun putting these together. I wanted to make sure before we got out of here that you knew what we were doing with social content. What we found was because of the podcast, we have a unique way of helping you get your social content out on a very easy way. What we're doing is we're interviewing people, and from that interview, we will capture a lot of information that will then be turned into videos, memes, articles, all things you can use for your social content. I know, like for me, one of the biggest struggles I had was, what do I put out there? What do I say on a regular basis? Well, we'll help do all that for you. So if this is at all of interest to you, reach out to us and let us help you grow your social media channel. I can tell you I did this for my business, and my social media is completely taking off. My Instagram, since I started doing this, jumped to over 10,000 followers, and it continues to grow. So if this is at all of interest to you, check the bottom of the show notes for the link that says, Get My Social Content Done right now.